Good, how are you?
Okay, if we could, let's go ahead and get started. My commitment to our staff who volunteered their time for us tonight is 1 hour more or less, so that's what we're gonna try to do. I put together, the way that we're trying to do this tonight, I put together 5 questions that hopefully will be some pertinent questions, that I picked those from our comprehensive plan meetings as well as those city council meetings we've had over the last 6 months on that. I left question number 5 being called closing and anything else a candidate would like to talk about. So that's kind of an open question that people can do. A couple of things we have that I want to bring up first. First of all, I'd like to really thank the staff for being there. I'd like to thank all our candidates for doing this. This is a tremendous thing for our city that y'all do. If you don't know that, you don't really pay a monetary fee for our council members.
Really?
So,
You don't really?
and we'll double that next year. We're doing nothing is there on that. So they are doing this out of the goodness of their heart to help our community, and we really do appreciate everybody that's running on that. It's a tough thing to run. It's a tough thing to serve, and it is, but it's gratifying, and I'm glad to see that we have such great candidates running on that. We're not going to be able to take any questions from our audience as we go through this. After the meeting, I'm going to ask if you want to go outside and being respectful of our neighbors. If you want to visit with some of the candidates, you can do that after the meeting is over.
Yeah,
Hello.
yes,
Trying to keep people muted.
Yeah.
Whack-a-mole.
So, I'm not blacking up their view, am I? Thank you.
Camera's up there.
Okay, to those I haven't had an opportunity to meet, I'm Tom Farrell, and I was asked to moderate this, which I'm doing my best, and if somebody has some suggestions, I will take that to mean that they're volunteering for the next one we have. So feel free to step forward. This is my last term time to do this, so somebody's going to have to step forward and do it anyway. So we'll start out. The way I've set this up is that on the first question, and I'll read those out, the candidates have been provided these questions in advance. The first question is going to be a 5-minute, more or less, time that we'll ask each candidate a question. Questions 2, 3, and 4 are going to be 3 minutes, and then the last question, which is basically closing by our candidates and letting them dwell on whatever other things that we haven't touched on in these this forum to do, and that's 5 minutes on that. And I'm just going to, when we get close, I'm going to raise my right hand with this. I'm not going to swear. I'm just going to raise my right hand, and y'all can kind of, if you would, just kind of close out on what comments you have on that. Okay?
Sounds good.
So let's go ahead and get started, if y'all don't mind. And I'm going to go ahead and read the questions. And one other thing, please, no applause until the end of the deal, and we'll applaud all our candidates for being able and willing to serve our community.
What about booze?
Yeah, booze, well, booze too. We'll just wait on those too. We're not going to get any. This is great that we've had everybody show up on this, and I just appreciate that. Thank everybody for doing this. I thank the staff, candidates, and we will go ahead and get started. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves, beginning with Sarah, Barry, and Kevin. And the question is, why did you decide to run or run again for our city council? And what do you hope to achieve, and how do you intend to achieve your goals? Sarah?
All right. I'm Sarah Hudson. My husband, late husband, and I moved to Rollingwood 30 years ago. At the time, my daughter was almost 3. I was 6 months pregnant with my first son. And we had another son 2 years later. So all three of my kids grew up here in Rollingwood. When we were looking for a home in Austin, the first thing we were considering was the school district. So that's why we picked Eanes. And then in the Eanes district, the reason why we settled on Rollingwood, found, thank goodness, was the big mature trees and the big usable yards. We loved the green space, and all of the trees. So that was really important, the feeling of space in the community. My husband, when the kids were little, served on the park commission for 6 years. We were actually, the whole family was part of the team that helped design the playscape that we have out there now, picking colors and which of the features of the playscapes the kids thought would be the most fun. And my daughter has a 3-year-old now. She lives out in Lakeway, and they have lots of neighborhood and subdivision parks out there and everything. She says that our toddler playscape is the best one that they have found anywhere in the area. So it's still surviving the test of time 20 plus years later. So he was on the on the park commission for 6 years, and shortly after that I got on the utility commission, served there for about 3.5 years, and then have been serving on city council for 13 years now. I have a degree from the University of Texas in civil engineering. I focused on water and wastewater design when I was at UT. I saw when I was on the utility commission, or before I got on the utility commission, how useful those skills were, and that background was for the things that the city was going through, all of the infrastructure, water and wastewater, streets, building issues. That was all really relevant background, and I continue to think that that's useful today, and then the years of experience now in dealing with all of the city issues. I'm vice president of a small engineering firm here in Austin, and we have about 35 employees. So the skills in running a small business and managing budget and project schedules and personnel of that size is very similar to the size of city that we have and the staff that we have here. So I think that that's been very useful in dealing with personnel issues here and budgeting issues here in the city as well. So when I first got into this, somebody asked me why I wanted to get into politics. And I said at the time that I did not consider this politics. I still do not consider this politics. Consider this my community service, and that, the skills and experience that I have, I see that it can be useful to maintaining this wonderful community that we all live in. And so that's, kind of my giving back to the community. What I want to achieve is to keep Rollingwood a nice place to live, make sure that we are taking care of our infrastructure and our tree canopy, our park, all of the things that attracted us all to Rollingwood in the first place. And so I want to make sure that we are properly preserving and protecting that, and making sure that the next generation of kids has a nice place for them to grow up into.
Thank you, Sarah. Barry?
Yep. My name is Barry Del Cambry. I started out and was born and raised actually in Mississippi. I grew up on a pecan orchard. So green space is one of the reasons why I think this place has always had a special place in my heart for me. Upon leaving and growing up there, I actually attended University of Mississippi Business School, where I actually met the love of my life. She's in the audience right there, my wife Macy. We bounced around after that for a few years, following her around on her dermatology endeavors from Tulane to Oregon, and then finally looking for a place that was more applicable for us to raise our family and kids. we came to Austin looking at Westlake and a few other areas, and then we just kind of stumbled upon this beautiful oasis of Rollingwood with large greenery, beautiful park, mature trees. It reminded me a lot of my home that I grew up in, just in a much more urban environment, and not being much of a urban dweller, I guess, for a lot of my life. It really just made me have a sense of calm, which I think is probably what most of y'all feel like when you come home and see the mature trees and the greenery and everything else. So from that standpoint, we fell in love with it. We got lucky to get the house we got. I mean, God willing, I still don't even know how we got it. But it was beautiful and a wonderful place to raise our kids. They've fallen in love with it. They love going to the park. We take our new dog to the dog park all the time, Fluffy. The kids named it. And so we really enjoyed it. From that standpoint, I think it's been a wonderful place to raise a family, and I also want to continue to make sure it is that place and us to grow smartly. 2 reasons why I really wanted to run. I think a diversity of ideas is good for any society, either a small community like ours or even one on a national level. I think my background being in business and having started 3 businesses now since I've been in Austin provide me a little bit of diverse understanding and thought, particularly when it comes to the business development. I've been on RCDC now for over 3 years, serving both as president and now just a member. But one of the key things I want to focus on is truly having smart growth in the business corridor. You'll hear me refer to that a lot in my kind of conversation. The business corridor really is that part on Bee Cave, nothing else. That area needs to really be enhanced, and really I wanted to find ways to use that business corridor to increase the revenue for the city so that we don't have to have bond elections for every time we need to have something improved. We have a diverse group of people here that, there's different income levels, different age groups. Bond elections impact everybody, and they're expensive, and they pay for them for generations. By improving the business corridor, I think we can add more dollars to the revenue for the city, and from there we can use that increased revenue to fund things like park enhancements that Sarah mentioned, and also infrastructure improvements. Having lived on Pleasant, which some of you may or may not know is really one of the heavier infrastructure needs from a drainage standpoint in the whole city. I think about 90% of Westlake flowed right through my yard. So I really want to find us ways to smartly develop the corridor so that we can then fund activities and things that the city needs, and not truly have to rely on bond elections, because drainage is going to be expensive, but we have to pay for it somehow. It's either via bond or by revenue. So I think it's much better to let people pay for it with doing transactions at our local businesses than having the onus put on us. So thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Kevin?
Well, first I want to thank Sarah for all her service to the city, and Barry for the things you've done on your work here in committees, and for stepping up to run for office. I know it's a sacrifice and a commitment for you guys. I know because I've been out walking blocks myself, and I've met about half y'all out in the neighborhood. And I know that if we get elected, we're going to be up here at least one night a month for 2 years is what they told me. Some talk about doing it two nights a month. But my background, I was born and raised in Dallas. I came to Austin in 1980 to attend the University of Texas, and might have set a record with a 0.25 grade average, and I had 4 F's and a D. My D was in the history of rock and roll in 1980. So after some junior college, and I graduated Texas A&M with a degree in economics, and then graduated Texas Tech School of Law, and did much better by the time I got to law school. Grew up a little bit. In Lubbock, I stayed and started my own law firm, which is now the largest personal injury firm in West Texas and New Mexico. We've got about 60 employees. And I tried 100 jury trials, catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases. I've tried cases in Austin. I won a $36 million whistleblower verdict against the state of Texas here many years ago in Scott McCowan's court, if any of y'all knew him. But George Bush signed a check to resolve that case at some point, and But most of my work is catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases. I've also worked as a developer and have built in West Texas, where I did most of my developing. I built a community much like Rollingwood, which was a square mile with 300 1-acre lots and a community park. And I did all of that with the help of some engineering firms that laid out streets and such for us, and homeowners association. And I built over 500 lots and built multifamily centers, commercial development with Alamo Draft House and hotels and such. In Lubbock, I also do developing, and I've got development land in Liberty Hill up north of here. And I've got and we ranch outside of Fredericksburg. We're cattle and hunting ranch, where I like to go. I was there this weekend where the Boy Scouts came down from Lubbock and had a camp out. We had about 50 kids out there. But my greatest achievement in my career, in my life, I think has been my 3 kids. My oldest boy, David, was a Marine JAG officer and is now practicing law with our firm. His wife, Mary's a dentist, and they've got 3 little kids. I got to walk them to school this morning in Lubbock. I travel quite a bit. I'm a pilot. I fly myself around. That's how I'm able to do that. My middle child, Catherine, is getting her second master's at UT here. She's in architecture, and she's a TA, helps teach architecture, and she worked intern for Gensler, if y'all know Gensler, but many of you do. And my youngest, Paul, is resident in internal medicine and psychiatry out at UC Davis. He went to Southwestern in Georgetown and then medical school in Colorado. And I'm very close to all my kids. My wife, Eva Ruth, and I, she's from Seguin. She graduated UT and got her master's in journalism there. She's a reporter. She writes for the Washington Post, and she is on deadline right now for NBC News, where she does podcast work. She's doing a political podcast with Steve Kornacki that comes out, I think, next week. And so they're working late on that, and so she's stressed out at home doing that. And we decided to live here. I had children close here at the time, but we got together about 10 years ago, and we decided that Rollingwood was the place to be because it is peaceful. We love the green space, we like the nature, and we like being close to downtown but without the traffic and such. I couldn't, I like to say I couldn't live in a big city, and yet here we are next to a big city, and we have all the wonderful benefits of a small community. So we love that. We built our house at Inwood Circle, 4 Inwood Circle. We tore down a house and got architects to design, and we built a house that I'm proud of the house that we built. I think it fits in within the natural environment there, which is important to us. So I decided to run mostly because the Save Rollingwood movement got my attention, and I'm part of the, now I would say, Preserve Rollingwood movement. I might have to thank Barry in part for running, since he was on the committee that recommended the milk and cookies, which kind of got a lot of people excited, including me. And opposing that and opposing commercial development of the park or high rises on bee caves or even the freestanding police station got me interested in serving. So that's why I'm running, is to try to help preserve Rollingwood.
Thank you, Kevin. Question number 2, and we'll start with Barry on this one, is the comprehensive plans, surveys, and meetings, as well as city council meetings, have shown a great deal of concern and discussion regarding drainage issues within our city. If you feel that this is an important issue, how do you intend to address this issue? And if you would limit it to 3 minutes,
Yep.
Barry. I know.
First, I'd like to say I'm proud that you got somebody invited and enrolled in civic politics. So well, at least my work is proved some fruit. As far as looking at the drainage issue within the city, as I mentioned before, the key area for me is how do we pay for this? It's expensive. We put it off for years. It's really been an area of great concern. As I mentioned before, where I used to live was a heavy flood area. Not all of y'all know this, but when we moved to the city of Rollingwood, our house got struck by lightning, and approximately, this was maybe 2 months moving in, the fire department actually couldn't make it to our house because the water was running so fast coming down the actual Pleasant Road that they were unable to come to us. So to me, so drainage in particular and infrastructure in particular is very important to me. I've seen what can happen when it goes awry. Luckily, we had another neighbor who was very friendly to us, actual councilwoman, Brooke Brown, who let us stay at our house where my kids and I would have been freezing cold and wet and without power in our house. The way I'd like to pay for that and the way I think it makes sense is to smartly develop the business corridor. So again, there's one way to do this is bond election. Kevin mentioned kind of what was proposed before for the business corridor. I think with the comprehensive plan, that's very much off the table. And our goal, and if elected, my goal is to execute that comprehensive plan. That plan clearly laid out a defined path for us to both optimize the residential area and also the business corridor. That went through many revisions, a lot of community input, and to me that is kind of our guiding post, I think, moving forward. The work I've done in the past was prior to that comprehensive plan, and I think that it was done in good spirit. Ultimately, the community decided that it was not the direction to go, and that is totally okay. We're not always going to agree on things, and that's fine. And ultimately, the right decision was made. That is what it is. And so I think moving forward with the commercial corridor in a smart way that develops and brings in the right amount of family-friendly and community-focused businesses that are that add value to our community. You don't want to you wouldn't want to attract the wrong businesses. So I mean, we're a community-first city, and I think our businesses should be community-first as well.
Thank you, Barry. Kevin?
So yes, I'm concerned about the drainage issues, and this is where I think my development experience, having developed property and dealt with drainage issues, can be helpful. But I also want to say at the start that if I'm elected, I will not be doing any developing that I have any personal interest in anywhere in or near Rollingwood ever, even after my term of service is done. I think that the kind of those sorts of conflicts of interest and ethical questions are critical. I think that my experience can, I'm in this for public service. I do know development. I understand development. I will continue to do development, just not here. My goal is to use my experience to help preserve Rollingwood from overdevelopment. That is my goal. So as far as drainage issues go, I do support bonding the drainage issue. I know it didn't get onto the ballot this time, and I support the other two bond issues. I think that we need to look at impervious cover limitations on new construction. I think we're kind of behind the curve on that here in Rollingwood. And we've allowed, encroachments on the setback provisions, which have operated as a substitute for impervious cover limitations. I think we need to revisit our development code, which we get to in another question here as far as like what's permitted and not permitted. And I think we might even consider new construction impact fees that might help for pay for drainage issues, because new construction does impact drainage, and if people are willing to spend $5 million on a new house, I think they could pay an impact fee for increasing the impervious cover from the existing house they tore down. When we tore down the house that I built, my instructions to the architect were, I don't want my new house to be on any bigger footprint than the house that we took down. And I wanted to, and I also told him we're not cutting down trees, no significant trees. And I made him go back to the drawing board at least once to comply with that request, because they just wanted to make it big. And we have about 2,500 square foot under roof or in air conditioned space. So as far as the commercial corridor goes, I do have experience in developing. I've developed very similar property to that, and I will tell you that I don't think we need to put residential in there, and one reason we shouldn't is because they are going to vote. And we could have easily put ourselves in a situation where we get outvoted by renters on bee caves who then want us to spend our tax revenue on amenities for them over there. And so I do think commercial development is good. I think when you talk about commercial development and what you'd like to have, it's a free market. And the market is always talking. The only question is whether you're listening. So I feel like government's role is not to select what businesses ought to go in on the corridor, but ought to create an environment that provides the infrastructure and makes it feasible for good development to occur, the kind of development that will generate tax revenue. But if we try to start picking and choosing winners and losers on development, I think we're going down the wrong path. Okay?
Thank you, Kevin. Sarah?
All right. Drainage has been one of my big concerns in Rollingwood since before I was even on the utility commission. I have seen the impact of, you know, when Rollingwood was built, there is no storm sewer system, right? That was not part of the plan. And when you had a lot of homes on big lots with, you know, modest homes because they had to have a drain field, then we had much less concern and issue with the runoff in town. We have not done anything to change the infrastructure for the runoff since we put in the sewer, and the homes have taken advantage of not having to have the drain field anymore. And so we are getting ever more and more runoff that needs to be managed. When we did the comprehensive plan surveys, drainage was by far the most, the highest ranked concern of members in the community. And so it's something that we really do need to address. While it would be great to think that we could get enough sales tax to pay for that, the infrastructure improvement plan that we did a few years ago that addressed all of the drainage concerns in the city had a price tag of $17 million. And we are not going to get that much sales tax no matter what we do on Bee Caves Road. So we need to make sure that the construction that is, the redevelopment that is happening in Rollingwood is paying for the increase in drainage issues that they are contributing to, because that is, you know, impervious cover is a dirty word. I know nobody likes to hear that, and nobody likes to talk about that, and that's not the only way to address it. But we do need to consider the additional runoff that is coming from all of the redevelopment in the community. And that was something that was specifically prohibited by the previous council, which I was on, but I did not vote this way. Was specifically prohibited from addressing impervious cover limits in the comprehensive plan, which seemed crazy to me because that makes it not comprehensive if you are taking something that critical off the table for consideration. So definitely something that we need to address sooner rather than later, and try and make sure that we are not exacerbating the existing problems that we have, and that we are addressing the problems.
Thank you, Sarah. Question number 3. The city has had a large number of existing homes demolished and rebuilt. What are your views regarding our current building code ordinances, current building setbacks, and do we need to make any changes to our current building code or ordinances? And that would be 3 minutes. And Kevin, if you start us off.
Sure. Well, I think it's great that we're having redevelopment. I think that, you know, a lot of places and situations it's very appropriate, and I'm glad for property owners to get to make the most of their property, fulfill their dreams, build what they'd like to build for the most part. And when you live in a community, though, you always have to take into account how your actions affect your neighbors. And so I'd like to see some changes. I think that we have relied on setback provisions in the past to sort of come up with the impervious cover limitations. It's not really enough, in my opinion, and I think, we do need to consider impervious cover limitations. We might even have to have a little bit more on-site detention than we've required with water flow for drainage issues. Those are the big ones. I think that, I understand we don't have a tree ordinance. A lot of places do. I know when tree ordinances first came along that they really irritated a lot of people. In Austin, you heard the governor complaining about tree ordinances in Austin. I'm a tree lover. I am all for preserving and protecting big trees. I think that's part of what makes this community so livable and so beautiful. And you just can't replace a mature oak tree. So I would support a tree ordinance. I think that, the height limitations that we have on houses, we ought to consider them. There have been some instances where some of the new construction around here have exceeded what I think is aesthetically reasonable height limitations. And so we might want to revisit that. I think one thing that's important too is that we have a lot of important, powerful people that live in Rollingwood, and they are used to getting their way. And a lot of folks who, when they don't get their way, have resorted to litigation or threats of litigation. And what I would say is, if I'm on council, I'm going to say, let's not be bullied by litigation. Let's first make sure that we're right and that we're applying the rules evenly and consistently and fairly. But then let's stick to our guns, and let's not, give up without a fight because somebody threatens a lawsuit. I've read some of the lawsuits that have been filed against this city, including the one over the tennis courts that was filed by the pool group that I'm a member of, and nobody told me we were suing the city, but I found the lawsuit and read it, and as I said, I've tried 100 jury trials, and I'm not really afraid of litigation when we're right. I think when we're right, we should stand up for ourselves and be right. It's not to say we don't listen to everybody's point of view and try to find a solution that's a win-win solution or take an unreasonably hard line on issues. But, at the same time, rules are rules, and I think they need to be enforced more than they have been in the past.
Thank you, Kate. Sarah?
All right, building code is probably my second most urgent concern and interest of what the city is dealing with these days. We actually last night had a joint meeting between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council to start looking at some issues with building height limitations and encroachments into the setback. So what part of a building can extend into the setbacks, like the eaves or balconies or things like that, and how far into the setbacks can they go. The other thing that we were talking about is something that I brought up several months ago. The comprehensive plan that we put in place actually focused primarily on the commercial corridor, and there was very little review of the residential building code and what we want the residential part of the city to look like. When we started the comprehensive plan process, that to me was the most critical thing that we should have been talking about, is what the residential portion of the city, how we were going to view that for our future, and we didn't. The people on the comprehensive plan strike force did a great job. Thank you, Tom. But they focused on the charge that was given to them, which was primarily the commercial side. So when we reviewed and adopted that as City Council, my caveat to that was that we then take up a comprehensive review of our city building code for residential properties, and that we put that together as an addendum to the comprehensive plan. And so that was, we started discussing that last night, and there will be further discussions about how we go forward with that, but that is something, we went from a city full of septic tanks to a city with sewer system, and that makes a big difference in what you can build, and we have not updated our building code to accommodate that change in circumstances, in over 20 years. And so that needs to be done to make sure that we are the ones that are deciding what Rollingwood looks like in the future instead of the builders, which right now the builders have the upper hand because we have not very many rules in Rollingwood on our development. So we need to decide what we want going forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Question number 4.
Do I get to
Oh,
go?
Barry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Barry.
I stand on my previous, no. Okay, yeah, so I think this question to me when you sent it over was one that required a lot of thought. And the first part being around, the first piece was being impervious cover. And I got to thinking about it, you know, and I think the impervious cover, the whole building code itself, I think there's loopholes in it. There's things that need to be changed. We need to look at it, but it's how we look at it to me that's important. I'll talk about this later, but I think in something in this magnitude and scale, similar to what Sarah said, this needs to be something that is on multiple meetings, multiple communication touch points, and something that is communicated and discussed amongst the entire city versus either council or P&Z. It has to be a comprehensive effort to understand what we as a collective Rollingwood want. And that's, I don't think the builders have a role in that. I think that's actually the people that live here and walk here every day. They are the ones that should be dictating this, but we need to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. This is a perfect example. You know, this is a candidate forum and there's, you know, we have 30 people here. I would like to have seen that much more engaged electorate. We don't always have that. So how do we as a city promote and inform people of what's going on a daily basis so that things like the Rollingwood residential building code can be updated in a way that takes into account everybody's feedback. That to me is, I think, the biggest thing that we're missing here. And hopefully as we move forward, that is something that is taken into account of what the collective we truly want, not just a few individuals. I think that's going to be very important. We have a diverse group of people here in Rollingwood, and I think it's important to hear everyone's opinion as well. And then from there, you make the best decision. You do, you know, as elected officials, you do the best you can with all the information you have. So it's important to listen, and then take that information in, and then make a decision based off of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Now,
Before we go,
Question.
would it be possible to get one more water?
sure. Can do that.
Please throw it.
We've got a lot of sweets up here. Please help yourself with those cookies and cupcakes and all that out there.
Could I ask if y'all wanted one, actually?
Thank you.
Item, question number 4. What are your views on the possible redevelopment of our Bee Cave Road commercial corridor? What would you like to see done to possibly incorporate your view of Rollingwood's commercial corridor? And that'd be 3 minutes, and Sarah, you can start, please.
Okay. Well, we've just gone through a very extensive comprehensive planning process that focused on the commercial corridor, as we've talked about already tonight. And they have come up with a number of recommendations that I think that we need to go forward with. Part of the focus is to make sure that we are providing a good buffer between the residential and the commercial for those people that live along Timberline and other adjacent streets, which would require us to do some changes in our code. And that was something that we have asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to start working on, the changes that we need to make in our ordinances. One of the things is allowing them to build closer to bee caves that would then free up more property behind, you know, kind of along the Dry Creek. There's been some ideas put forth to try and have a rear walking access to some of those so that we have better ability to access those without having to drive and get on bee caves. I think that would be great. When we first moved here, and for a number of years afterwards, there were a lot more restaurants over there on bee caves. And I think part of the problem was that they are hard to see you know, the elevation on the south side of Bee Caves Road, they're not very visible, and our sign ordinances are kind of restrictive. And so if there are things that we could do to make it more visible and easier for people to see them when they're approaching, that would be helpful. I mean, all of the, you know, McAllister's and Susie's and Easy's and, you know, all of those restaurants were up there near where Collectic Home was and across, and now those are all medical facilities, which don't provide any tax revenue. And while nice to have the medical facilities nearby, we can't go eat there. So I think people would appreciate having more of that. Another thing that was suggested is that we have some big office buildings, but they were precluded in the PUD from having any kind of a restaurant in the office buildings, and a delicatessen in an office building that would provide, you know, I've been in office buildings downtown where, you know, you have a meeting, you call down to the deli, you order sandwiches, they bring them up, and you just, you know, you have a working meal. That's tax revenue. I think that would be helpful to consider that as well.
Thank you, sir. Barry?
Yeah. So as far as the comprehensive plan goes, I'm for enacting it. I mean, I think, like I mentioned before, the community itself put a lot of time and effort. I mean, it was over a year that thing was put together. A variety of members from different councils, individuals in the community, and I think it's on us or whoever is elected, truly, and even myself on RCDC now, is to find ways to enact that. Being on RCDC, we have partnered with a company called Retail Coach, and while not hand-picking who comes here, they have been helpful in engaging different businesses, QSRs, quick service restaurants, to reach out and kind of tell them about Rollingwood. Something not everyone knows about who we are. So that effort has been ongoing. I think we'll see the fruits of those labors here relatively soon. But I think that is one area where we really can add to the tax revenue. To Sarah's point, medical buildings medical offices, they don't generate sales tax revenue like you would from a QSR, a quick service restaurant, you know, a Hobdoddy, McAllister's, any of those. They generate the revenue, and that's the revenue that we need to, you know, fund things for the city that the city pays for, things like the park. Or even though the bond may be $17 million, every dollar that comes in from a tax revenue standpoint is a dollar the citizen doesn't have to pay, so it's still a cost savings. The other thing I'd like to point out is if we do go into the development side, there's a lot of areas here that are single-story strip malls as part of the development. If you can get more diverse group of people in those or businesses in those establishments, that can help generate more revenue. Again, you got to be smart about how you develop or how you encourage development. Obviously, we can't determine who goes in, you know, what pad, but I think it's as we write our code and as we do our outreach, if we do it smartly, I think we can make sure that the commercial corridor reflects the beauty and splendor that is the residential side, and that's my goal as I look forward and try to serve on the council. That's it.
Thank you, Barry.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin?
So I did read the comprehensive plan, and I do think it was well done. It was thoughtful. I appreciated the limitation suggestion on the north side of Bee Caves of being like, I think 2 stories, what they recommended. I thought that was a good idea, and I do think that there's potential for taller development on the south side of Bee Caves, which is fine. I do agree with both of y'all, Sarah and Barry, about you know, zoning in such a way to encourage retail and restaurants as opposed to office or medical, or as I mentioned before, residential, because those are activities that do generate more sales tax revenue. They are more amenities to us as residents to have those sorts of uses there, and I think they're more consistent with the adjacent single-family home that we, you know, that should be considered and protected in any development planning. You know, my concern is I do like the idea of improving the walkability of it, and even reducing the setbacks on bee caves is also a good idea. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and I do remember reading one mention about that we ought to consider impervious cover limitations on residential in that comprehensive plan, which I was surprised to see, because I know that's been a touchy issue, but I was glad to see it in there that the subject has been brought up. But on the commercial corridor, I'm always going to be concerned about the residents of Rollingwood and the ones who live adjacent to it and the buffering, and I'm always going to be concerned about anything we do that increases traffic. That's always a concern for me. But, you know, the market is going to do what it does over there. I think we can encourage it through zoning, and it'd be nice. Part of the problem I think that we have looking at it, you know, from my experience as a developer, is that there's a lot of small lots over there. And, you know, one of the hard things, I was involved in a lot of the Lubbock downtown redevelopment efforts, and one of the difficult things was aggregating small lots and getting them to be big enough to where you could do something useful with them. And that's kind of a market problem more than a government problem, but I do think it's something that we need to be aware of. And, you know, I think it's a good plan. I don't really have any real criticisms of the comprehensive development plan. I thought it was thoughtful. One idea that, you know, I had that I saw that I like, you know, it's a premature idea, or maybe it's not consistent with the other things we're doing right now, but just as a thought, you know, I saw what Bee Caves did with the Galleria Hill Country, where they incorporated their city hall into the commercial development. And I thought it was smart, because if we did have a large redevelopment, say where the, you know, China, I always call it the wrong name, China Star, or is it Chinatown. I always call it China Star. It's Chinatown. If we did get a bigger development in there, I could see us negotiating as part of the deal for the development to maybe get a place for the police station to save us the money of the bond money that we're going to spend building it. Also would take some of the stress off this park. This could make a great little community center if we could incorporate some of our government buildings into a redevelopment over there. It's just an early thought.
Thank you, Kevin. Question number 5 would be y'all's closing comments, and feel free to include any other issue that you would like to address on this. And we've left a lot of time, so it's 5 minutes, and we'll start with Barry.
Yep. First, I'd like to thank everyone here. I think it's, I know that just like us up here, it's a lot of effort to get down here at 6:30 on a Thursday night, so appreciate everyone coming down. Hopefully we'll have more in the future, which actually leads me to my next point. I think that the previous election cycle, there was a lot of focus on a variety of things, one being transparency, and I think they've done a really good job of trying to do that. Where I think we as a city have fallen short is actually more on the promotion of the activities that are going on from an RCDC standpoint, from a council standpoint, parks, zoning, everything in general. We have meetings on a monthly basis, and this is one of the larger turnouts we'll have. There's a lot of activities going on for a lot of people who work very hard to serve this city, and there's little community involvement, and a large part of that, I think, is people aren't even aware of what's going on. I'd like to see us as a city do more to be outbound in our communication. I'd like us to do more if we can do social media or any type of communication from a digital standpoint, sending mailers in the mail, anything to let people know at least this is our monthly calendar of activities that are going on, so that people can come, show up, and give their voice, so that we as a collective can make our voices heard, because that's what makes us a better city. I think that is what we're missing. We have a lot of really smart people in this city who have tons of wealth of information that we should be leveraging. They just don't know that things are going on, and that's their fault. And I think also from our standpoint, we can do a lot to improve that. I really think that is something that we should get behind. It's not easy to get information. Again, I'd like to see some type of ongoing communication besides just posting a meeting that's posted outside or posting on the website, which is what we've done. We're not I think that's what's the bare minimum that's required under state law. We're not a bare minimum city. We shouldn't be a bare minimum from our requirements on our promotion of what's going on. I really think that is important for us as we move forward, and regardless of if I'm elected or not, I really want to work with the city and help them make sure that they really act. There's a marketing arm that needs to happen much more, I think, on what we're doing from a city standpoint to really engage the electorate, engage the people that live here, and really make sure that everyone knows what's going on. I think that is something to me that would make us a much stronger community. You wouldn't have divisiveness that we had in the last election. You would have a much more cohesive conversation happening with everyone coming together, being much more of a community than what we sometimes are. And I think to me that's critical. So that's what I'd like to see happen and change. And thank you very much, and thank y'all. Thank you, Tom, for putting this together.
Thank you, Barry. Kevin?
Well, also I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, showing interest in what we have to say about this election, and thanks, Tom, for organizing the event. You know, I want to reiterate, you know, what I started with, which is why I'm running, and it's for public service for me. You know, somebody that a friend of mine said, I live here, I give here, and I try to do that. I've always tried to be a part of my community. I did it in Lubbock, where I was on the board of the Law School Foundation for 15 years. I was on the board of the South Plains Council of Boy Scouts of America for more than 10 years, and I was involved in city committees like the Entertainment and Arts Facilities Task Force that we ended up getting a $150 million theater built. If you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty cool. The Buddy Holly Hall out there, it's pretty slick. Got to see Robert Earl Keen on his farewell tour there, and it was fun for me, having been involved in it from the very beginning, putting the dirt together and laying out the plan for it and seeing it to completion on that committee. And so I like to serve public service, but I'll also tell you that I think city government should be boring. And our city government has not been that boring, and that's really what prompted me to get involved. Like I said, I did not like the idea of commercializing the park, and I did not like the police station idea. Now, those are things in the past, but the ideas of commercializing the park aren't completely in the past. There are people who have lots of great ideas for whatever it is that their interest is in, you know, developing this or that or improving this or that. And frankly, I'm more into preserving what we have. And I don't think that, you know, I think that a lot of people have issues that they are important to them, and I think we should listen to those and consider them. But to me, what we have to weigh is what's the interest of the community at large. You know, if you have an interest in a particular thing that you want to see get developed here in the park, that's great, but how does it affect the rest of the community? And, you know, if you're interested in exceeding setbacks or building your house taller than the code allows, you know, how does that affect the rest of the community? And we hadn't mentioned our fence ordinance, but I think it could be revisited as well. It's very confusing. I tried to figure it out myself, but I think the spirit of it is good, that we keep open yards, but some of it's hard to figure out. So I think that where I can help is with my experience in development, and as I said, I'm not going to use that for my own benefit, not now and not ever with regard to Rollingwood. But I think also I can help with dealing with, you know, making sure that we do things according to the rule of law, that we follow open meetings rules and laws, and that we you know, avoid conflicts of interest or ethical, you know, anything that's questionable as far as people having an interest in what's going on, that should be more of a community interest. And I think I can help maybe, you know, listen to both sides on issues and help find positive win-win solutions, or, you know, resolve things in a way that isn't necessarily contentious. Ironically, I think my experience as a trial lawyer helps me. It is a form of conflict resolution, and that's really what I've done for a living, is conflict resolution for a long, long time. And I'm happy to try to serve in a role to do that. But I do think it comes down to, at the end of the day, as to what's in the community interest versus what some small group of people think is just a great idea that they'd love to have. And it comes down to, I don't know, preserving our community and what makes it great, which is it's quiet, it's got trees, you know, it's the deed where the Hatley fields were dedicated. I've read the lease involved with the ball fields, and I understand, you know, we want to support youth sports. I support youth sports, but at the same time, we also have community residents that I think need to be considered and represented in all of that. And sometimes I feel like there's been times looking at it in the past over the few years where some people have pushed an agenda a little bit harder than they need to try to force something through, and we hear about it kind of too late or at the last minute, and it's like, how did this happen? Why is this happening? And why can't we just leave things alone? So that's why I'm running, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you, and thank you, Tom, for
Thank
putting
you,
on this
Kevin.
event.
Sarah?
All right, well, again, Tom, thank you for putting this together, and thank you for everybody who showed up here in person and people who are online, who look up here, but you're on the screen over there. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. I don't have much more to say. We've talked a lot up here. I've been up here on this dais once a month for the last 17 years between utility commission and city council, so I think everybody's heard me talk a lot. So I've appreciated the opportunity to use my experience for the benefit of the city and the members of the community. I would, I've seen my kids play on our playscape here, and now I'm all the way through the point where my grandson is playing on it, and so, have kind of a broad view of the needs of all ages in the community, and I would like to continue to use that experience in the service of the community. So I would appreciate your vote to let me keep on doing that. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to thank all three of y'all for running. I think any city would be well placed to have each one of y'all doing this, and we do thank y'all for y'all's time and effort in my behalf. Thank everybody for coming on that, and thank our staff, our wonderful staff, for doing this. And we have police, chief, and staff for helping us on that, and she kept everybody in line.
No problem.
Tase anybody?
No tasing, no handcuffs.
That's right. So, I would, as we leave, I would ask that we respect our neighbors, on that. Candidates, if they wish, can answer some questions outside. We do have, all of these suites. We're gonna leave them for staff if you don't take some, but please feel free to do so. That's why they're here. So we can do it, and thank everybody and for goodness sake, don't forget to vote. So thank y'all all for